Good afternoon and welcome to Wallops Flight Facility in Virginia. I'm Tabitha Thompson with NASA's Office of Communications. This afternoon we're going to hear about several of the research experiments headed up to the International Space Station on tomorrow's Cargo Resupply Services mission on Orbital ATK Cygnus. We have a lot of great information to share with you. We look forward to hearing your questions. I'm going to start with Camille Elaine with the International Space Station Program Science Office and Patrick O'Neill, who's with the Center for the Advancement of Science in Space.
Thank you, Tabitha. Hello, everybody. It's so great to have a packed house, and thank you for your interest in the science and research we're flying tomorrow. We're always excited. Tomorrow we'll be flying about 1,900 pounds of research supplies and science on board Orbital ATK CRS-8. And that research will be supporting the 300 ongoing or new investigations that we have currently going on during Expedition 53-54. All the experiments are supporting a multitude of scientific disciplines that the ISS has the capability to support, including the biology and biotechnology, physical science research, human research, technology demonstration, earth and space science, and education. We know the presence of the astronauts really inspires students, so we take that opportunity to engage them in their science, technology, engineering, and math. The reason we do this research is for several purposes: to advance our scientific knowledge through scientific discovery. We also want to enable future space exploration. We are also creating this commercial marketplace in low Earth orbit, and then we're doing research that has a benefit to improving the quality of our lives here on Earth. We sponsor many different types of research. NASA sponsors research to support our science missions, to support our space technology missions, to support our human research. We also have international partners. It's an international space station, so we do research that is in support of our international partner national goals. And then we do research that supports the ISS US National Laboratory, which is managed by the Center for the Advancement of Science in Space. And now I'll hand it over to Patrick, who represents CASIS, and he'll tell you a little bit more about the research being done in the US National Lab. Patrick.
Thank you very much, Camille. Well, hey, once again, as Camille said, it's awesome to see so many people out here. And my name is Patrick O'Neill. I'm with the Center for the Advancement of Science in Space. Some of you might have been hearing about this organization called CASIS, or the U.S. National Lab. Prior to your being here, how many people knew that the ISS actually was a national laboratory? Wow, okay. Well, it seems every single launch we're getting more and more people that are raising their hands, which means that we're sending a lot of great research to the space station. That's a great problem to have. So a little background, though, for those that might not be familiar with the ISS National Lab concept. In 2005, Congress declared the U.S. portion a national laboratory. The thought process was to try to open up research channels to non-NASA initiatives, specifically to use the space station to benefit life on Earth. And so CASIS became that entity that was tasked with managing the National Laboratory in 2011. And I have to say that we are really starting to enter the golden years of the International Space Station from a research perspective. We're constantly evolving the station for the needs of the research community. You're going to be hearing from some of the individuals who are responsible for commercial facilities on the station today that are enabling more and more access for researchers to be able to leverage this incredible platform to benefit life on Earth. On this particular launch, we really do have kind of a myriad of investigations that are going up, representing life sciences, Earth observation, cube satellite technology, and there's going to be an abundance of student payloads that are going up on this investigation. So it's truly an exciting time to be involved in the ISS research, and I think that we're going to hear a heck of a lot more about some of the payloads that are going to be going up today. I think at this point, Camille and I were happy to answer any questions that folks might have.
Hold on just one second.
So you mentioned there are 300 or so experiments ongoing new. Who decides on which experiments get involved in this program?
So I talked a little bit about that earlier
Okay,
in the
yeah.
in the news conference. So we have different sponsors that sponsor their particular research, right? So from a NASA perspective, the research we do to enable future space exploration is sponsored through several missions: the science mission, the space technology mission, the human research program. Then we have the U.S. National Lab portfolio, and they decide what science is important to them that has a benefit to our lives here on Earth. And so that's a whole other portfolio that they decide. And then the international partners, they decide what is important to them that support their national goals. So those sponsors actually decide what type of research we'll do on the space station.
I have the mic.
I understand there's a CubeSat launcher on the ISS, but also the Cygnus that's going up has a certain capacity for CubeSats. So I guess we're seeing that from here. What's the life of a CubeSat after it is orbited, and how long do they take to deorbit, and what's the capacity of the Cygnus?
Oh my gosh, you know what? Hold that question for the guy. We have the CubeSat experts here, the PIs who are going to fly their CubeSat, and it actually just depends. So they'll be able to answer that question.
Hi, my name's Edward Young from Harry S. Truman High School. You mentioned CASIS, and that's for, I believe, the funding for the student profile or the student programs. I guess that's university students. And if so, is that going to be opening doors for potential high school programs as well?
So I would actually say the vast majority of the STEM payloads that go up that are part of the ISS National Lab manifest represent high school students and middle school, basically 6 to 12. So that's really kind of where we focus an awful lot of our efforts. And as an educator, I'm sure that you know that when you're in the middle school ages, that's typically where you tend to see the students kind of deter from math and science. And so, if anything, we're really trying to show that the space station is something that you could take advantage of from a student research perspective. There's a variety of programs that we are involved with or that we sponsor. You're going to hear actually a little bit about some of them today. But happy to go and talk with you further about some other ways that you can be involved from a STEM education standpoint.
Thank you both very much. Up next, we have Henry Martin to answer those burning questions about deploying CubeSats. Henry Martin with NanoRacks and Cassie Wong, who is with the Cargo Resupply Systems. She's an engineer with Orbital ATK.
Hi, welcome everybody. I'm Cassie Wong with Orbital ATK. I'm a systems engineer on the CRS program. Cygnus' primary mission is to deliver cargo to the International Space Station and to transport trash on the way back in vehicle reentry. So we're very excited for OA-8 coming up. The Cygnus service module consists of the pressurized cargo module and the service module. You can see in the picture behind me, the lower portion is the service module and the upper portion is the cargo module. The service module consists of all the subsystems that we need to fly the mission, such as the avionics, the communications equipment, the guidance, navigation, and control equipment, the propulsion, and all the other subsystems. The pressurized cargo module holds over 900 cubic feet of volume for the cargo. Somebody at work once told me that holds 400,000 golf balls. I don't know. I don't know if that provides much of a reference, but it does hold a lot of cargo. OA-8 is delivering over 7,400 pounds of cargo to the station. But Cygnus has really evolved into much more than just a transport and delivery service. It's now become a valuable secondary science platform for all these payloads that you're going to hear today. So we're very excited about that at Orbital ATK. On the past 3 missions, we hosted the Sapphire experiment, and that studied flame propagation in microgravity environment, and that occurred after we departed the station. The experiment began. So that was an exciting opportunity for us. OA-8 is also paving the way for a new capability for Cygnus, and it's acting as an ISS lab extension. So this will mean it's an active laboratory for the crew to use while on station. This doesn't seem like too much of a big deal, but if you think about it, if you bring stuff continually into your house over and over, it's going to get quite full if you're not bringing things out. We bring a lot of cargo, we bring a lot of experiments to the space station, and not as much comes out. So they are quite tight for space for running labs and experiments up there. So being able to unpack Cygnus and then bring in the Tango Lab facility and use it as an active lab is really quite a new capability for the station and quite an exciting thing for Cygnus. So we're really excited about that opportunity. We are thrilled at Orbital ATK to promote increasing our knowledge and capabilities in space through the use of Cygnus. We are on a future mission going to be able to support live rodents on our mission so we can bring them up to the space station for additional space research. We also have some concepts that go beyond the International Space Station. There's some concepts out there of using Cygnus as a deep space habitat by connecting multiple Cygnuses together and allowing for it to be used as a habitat in space. One of our key partners, though, on secondary missions is NanoRacks. And NanoRacks has flown with us for the last 3 missions, and they are flying again for OA-8. And we're really excited. It's record-breaking in this case that we have a full complement of satellites on board NanoRacks. So we have 14 CubeSats going to deploy on OA-8. So here to talk a little bit more about that is Henry from NanoRacks.
Why, thank you, Cassie. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Henry Martin. I'm from NanoRacks. I'm going to talk all about the stuff we have on board the OA-8 launch, which includes stuff on the outside of the Cygnus as well as the inside. I have some slides, so can we throw those up, please? Okay, anyway, I can start talking. So like I said, we have stuff on the inside and the outside. That's pretty cool. I'm going to focus on the outside stuff first, and then we'll talk a little bit on the inside. And again, I'm going to focus more on our hardware, which my job is to get the satellites that our payload developers have made into orbit. So if we look here, here's a couple of satellites. There's a model of Isara, that's it, that's ChefSat. So these satellites are being integrated in our clean room in Houston to the external satellite deployer, which goes on the service module of the Cygnus. So that's on the outside. So go to the next slide here. Like Cassie said, we have 14 total. Here it is again. You can go to the next slide. Please. So once they're all done, we've done 14 total. It's long hours, long days. It's a lot of hard work, a lot of paperwork, but that's okay. Once we're all done, that's the last time anybody ever is going to touch those satellites. So there are no more hands-on, people. And so what we'll do is we'll put it in a box, and then we ship it from Houston to here. And everybody's happy about it. So once it's here, it's another game time. So next slide, please. And this is a video, so this is kind of cool. This is a time-lapse video of how we actually install this thing on the side of the service module of the Cygnus. So you see that panel with the white square around it? They wrap the bag up. That's where the box, which is kind of on the bottom left, is going. And so what we do, it's really great to work with Orbital on this. They're so good at it. It's hard work. They have a fantastic team. And what happens here is essentially we take the box, we mount it on the outside, cover it in a blanket so it stays nice and warm and everybody's happy. And that's it. That's also the last time that anybody will ever touch it. So once it's there, keep in mind, it never goes through the inside of the ISS. So it just hangs out with the Cygnus until once it's done, the Cygnus will unload all of its cargo. They'll load it full of the trash and waste that is made on orbit. And instead of it going to burn up immediately, the Cygnus actually travels to a higher orbit. So the ISS goes around 400 kilometers. And what the Cygnus does is it uses its extra prop to go to 500. And so if your question earlier about lifetime, that's cool. Higher orbit equals higher lifetime. Low Earth orbit actually pulls in things very slowly, so eventually they all burn up and it cleans itself. But if you go to 500 kilometers, we estimate you get like 3 to 5 years of lifetime. If you go directly from the ISS, it's like 9 months to a year. So with that extra time, you can get more science, get more value. Some of our customers are doing straight research. Some of our customers use the information they get and they sell it to various people for uses. So that's really great about the Cygnus. Like I said, this is the 4th time we've done this. It's totally full. As Cassie said before, we were not able to fill it, but now we are currently displaying the full capability of the system. So if you go to the next slide, so it's done, it leaves. You can see the little white box below, well, I guess above the green light. That's our thing. I think this is OA-4 or OA-6 or OA-5. Go to the next slide, please. And so there they are. The crew's happy. They get to watch the leave. You can see the white box. It's pretty cool. Next slide, please. All right. So this is a video of how this actually works. So right now it's at 500 kilometers. You can see the Earth orbiting in the back there. It's pretty neat. Give it a little second. And you can see there's 3 doors. Each one of those doors has a bunch of satellites in one of the silos behind it. And once Orbital issues the commands, hopefully it'll go here in a second, the door will open and out come the CubeSats, just like that. So this time we'll have 14 total, so we'll do it in sort of a phased approach. We'll wait a few hours, deploy the rest, wait a few hours, deploy the rest. And that's it for the external stuff. Our customers include universities, research centers, whom you will hear from soon, the NRO Office of Space Launch, as well as a commercial customer who we continue to contribute to their constellation on orbit, the Lemurs at Aspire Global out of Glasgow. Next slide. I think that's it. So that's it for me. We also have some stuff on the inside, which we'll talk about here. One of them is a biological satellite, which is super cool. It's the first one for us. It's a lot of many firsts for NanoRacks here. And with that, I think I can turn this over.
Thank you both. Don't leave though. If you have a question, please raise your hand and wait for the microphone to reach you. If you're following along on NASA's social channels, just use the hashtag #AskNASA. I think we have one right now.
So yeah, this question came in through hashtag #AskNASA, and it's about for Orbital, and it's the questions from at Skyfire747. Is there a specific order of loading supplies onto the rocket?
Very good question. Yes, there is. So certainly things that are closer to the door are more accessible to the astronauts. And so NASA gives us a priority for what is installed and based on what they are going to take out. So certainly the crew will start in the front and then they go towards the back. So that is given to us by NASA with install this in a certain order, and we follow that accordingly. There's also what's considered late load cargo, so things that are time critical. Those are installed later in our flow.
Pointed to this, but you didn't really tell us what it is.
Yeah, let me talk about this. So this is a satellite deployer that we use on the inside of the ISS. So a little different from the outside. This goes on an airlock slide table in the Japanese airlock module. What it is we take these satellites, actually, one like this, and on the ground, we put them, as we call it, in the can. We put it in here, and then what we do is they load it on their Cygnus. It goes up. The crew pulls it out. They'll put it on a slide table. Actually, there will be 8 of these, and the Japanese robotic arm will come. It'll grab it. It'll kind of point it away, and someone clicks a button, and these little doors open, and out go the CubeSats. So we are launching one of these like this. We're launching another one which houses ECAMSat, which we'll hear from soon, and that will join a current complement of 3 others on orbit, one from Goddard, one from JPL, and one from Penn State University, and they will perform their airlock operations hopefully a little bit later this month, and that will be our 13th mission. So we should get close to 200 CubeSats, and then once we deploy from the Cygnus, we'll have hit over 200.
Before we came up here earlier, that this is actually one that has flown. So this is
That's true.
a
We
flown
reuse all of
deployer.
this stuff if we can. I wish we could use the Cygnus, but unfortunately it burns up. Can't get it. But this, we reuse if we can. They work every time.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions in the room?
I have a quick question. My name is Brian Meyer. I'm from the Orbital Social. Are the CubeSats ejected mechanically or through a propulsive method?
It's just a spring, actually. So what happens is the whole system is loaded before against the doors, as we saw. And when the doors open, that spring works every time, just pushes them right out. But propulsion is a good thing you mentioned, because 2 of the satellites we're flying, which you'll hear, actually have a small water prop system. I won't steal your thunder. And that one is neat because not only is it one of the first times we're flying prop to the station, but this will actually go above the ISS, which is a first for everybody, us, including the whole program.
We have time for one more question. Do we have one in the room? Anything from Ask NASA? Okay, thank you both.
Thanks.
Our next speaker is Elwood Agassiz, who is Deputy Program Manager of the Small Spacecraft Technology Program.
Hello, everyone. I'm real happy to be here. The Space Technology Mission Directorate, through the Small Spacecraft Technology Program, will be flying 3 spacecraft on this particular mission, and they're both going to be demonstrating some advanced communication systems. You'll see some videos that will come up shortly that will actually show you what the projected flight sequence will look like for both of them. These are models of the 2 spacecraft we have here. The first one is ISARA, the Integrated Solar Array Reflect Array Communication Satellite. And this other one, there will be 2 of these, is called OCSD, Optical Communications and Sensor Demonstration Satellite. And this one, the Optical Communications Satellite, will demonstrate the first time in the SmallSat platform laser communications. They're going to be using some technology that's very similar to some of the terrestrial technology. It'll have a capability to demonstrate communication speeds through optical communications up to about 200 megabits per second, which is really an advancement for small satellites. And then the ISARA will use Ka band communications, again, to demonstrate high bandwidth communication speeds. Is that video? Okay. I think the first one should be ISARA. And it is. And so this is the ISARA after it's been ejected from the canister, we call it. And the unique thing about this is that the solar array, which is on one side, and then the antenna is on the other side. So this is the solar array side that you see. That will deploy after the spacecraft is stabilized. And the particular orbit, it'll pass over a ground station that's located near JPL in Southern California. And the system will start transmitting their radio transmission over the ground station there. And with that, we have about 5 months or so of lifetime. We'll be doing several passes to look at downloading basically some data at this high bandwidth speed. And this is the ground station over JPL. Next one. And the next video you're going to see will be OCSD. And here it is being ejected now. Soon over your house. No, there's a ground station over Mount Wilson, Southern California. So here's the maneuvering portion that I spoke of. So they'll get to a position roughly about 200 meters from each other. And this is done autonomously. This is not done from the ground, which is another important feature. And so we're hoping with these demonstrations to infuse these into future NASA missions. And so these are capabilities that will not only enhance the capabilities of the CubeSat platform in and of itself, but it'll also be used, it can be used in a cross-cutting fashion across other science missions that they hope to work on and for future NASA missions. Hey, that's it.
Thank you, Elwood.
Thank you.
If you have a question in the room, please raise your hand and wait for the microphone to get to you. And if you're following along on NASA's social channels, make sure that you use the hashtag AskNASA. We have a question right up front.
So while the satellites are in orbit, what's the duration that they'll be in contact with the ground sats? How long over each pass will they have direct contact with the ground stations?
They'll have something on the order of like maybe about 4 to about 10 minutes per pass. It all depends upon the ground speed and their tracking. They'll be doing a little bit of slewing as well over the ground stations to maximize the contact period.
Thank you. Next question we'll take is from Ask NASA.
So now this question is, how many Mbps do current small satellites transmit via RF, radio frequency? I think is the last one.
So that's a good question. We're typically using UHF and lower transmission speeds, 9.6 kilobits. So if you can imagine 200 with this, now several orders of magnitude, and we're in the gigahertz range for this, so it's very high speed, right? So at least an order of magnitude in the Ka band. There's a question over there.
Hello. We were up at NASA Goddard last week, learned about another NASA mission for laser communication between a ground station, the satellites, and the International Space Station. Is this laser communication in any way related to that one, or is this a completely separate, independent investigation?
This is independent. We funded this several years ago. The thing that was interesting about this particular system is they use a combination of terrestrial-based systems as well as more space-based applications, but they've been able to get this in a really compact format. The laser head in and of itself is just very small, so this is a 1.5U CubeSat, and they looked at this from the perspective of power and mass. Right?
Raise your hand. And do we have anything from Ask NASA? Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Steven Spraymo, and he is the project manager for ECAMSat, also from Ames Research Center.
Hello. It's great to be here at Wallops today. Happy Veterans Day. I know we have a few veterans around I've spoken to, so I'd like to talk about ECAMSat today. It stands for E. coli Antimicrobial Satellite, and it's sponsored by the Human Exploration and Operations Mission Directorate. Specifically, the division is Space Life and Physical Sciences at NASA headquarters that sponsored this today. It is our goal to enable science, enable discovery for new scientific methods. So with that said, we're studying antibiotic resistance for a number of reasons. One is that astronauts have some immune suppression issues in space, and there's specifically a type of E. coli that we're flying today that will have a mutant and a wild type. We have two different genes in there, and basically the genes are, one is has the ability to show a stress response, and another one, the other mutant has a deleted gene. So the knockdown effect from the antibiotic is different in both types, and we'll compare from basically up in space and microgravity versus the 1G environment on Earth. So we'll have a parallel experiment on the ground. So the satellite itself, the experiment was designed by Dr. A.C. Mateen at Stanford University. I'd like to put up some slides, if we have those. So here's the actual spacecraft. The spacecraft itself is basically the size of 2 loaves of bread, and it's 23 pounds or 10.5 kilograms. So it has 2 communication systems on it. One is a UHF radio, which will be communicating with the ham radio community around the world, and we'll have a system on it to do outreach. So ham radio operators can help us find the spacecraft in the first 4 days of launch, and that's a great program. Santa Clara University will also be communicating with it for us and doing mission operations. So within this, 1/3 of the spacecraft houses a laboratory. And within that laboratory, we have a microfluidics card. So I'd like to show the next slide. So this is the experiment canister. It's a 1 atmosphere canister, and basically has electronics that will do detection and measurement of different phases of the experiment. There'll be 3 48-hour phases of the experiment, and we'll be feeding them, administering antibiotic, and then watching a stress response with a indicator that measures enzyme activity or a metabolic change as enzymes are expressing with the 2 different stress responses and after the antibiotic is administered. Next slide, please. So within the canister, we have a number of items that it looks like a spaghetti of, it looks like a mess here, but we compact that all down, and there's a very precise packing order. So within that, we have a number of custom blood bags that we've developed, and that houses the actual liquid we'll send through the system. Next slide. So this is after the experiment has actually been activated and gone through a number of steps. There's 20 steps in this experiment, and it'll last about 150 hours. If we could pan back to the desk here. Can the camera come back to me for a moment? Thank you. So we have this canister, and this is roughly the size of the laboratory that we'll be flying. It connects up with the rest of the spacecraft, and the whole system operates off 3 to 10 watts of power. Compared to your incandescent light bulb, this is pretty amazing. It also maintains human body temperature to 37 degrees centigrade, plus or minus 1 degree C, even with extreme environment of space. So hundreds of degrees swing outside the spacecraft on the surface temperatures, and we are able to maintain this at human body temperature still. Within that, we have pumps and valves, very precise circulation pumps and metering pumps, where we actually mix the antibiotic in the system, and we administer the doses of high, medium, low, and control, which would be no antibiotic. This is an example of a microfluidics card, and I know it's hard to see, but it has 48 well plates, and we have about 48 little experiment wells that are the size of an eraser head here. And it contains different E. coli experiments, which we have photodetectors and LEDs that shine through. And basically, the channels in here are so small that even the smallest ant would not be able to crawl through it. So as we go on, I'll just show you a little bit of a buildup of what we do. So we have heaters that we add, and this keeps a very even distribution of heat around the system, and on. We start building up more of the components, and then you get to the valving system, and all of this works with the circuit board with an automated program. The system is autonomous, and it will run every step of this experiment. We will basically have Santa Clara University to intervene if there's any kind of issue, but mostly their job is to download data, which is about a megabyte file, which is very similar to a sound bite or a song that you download off the internet, so in scale. I have a video to show today as well. Could we show the wide? Yeah, there you go. So this is us loading the actual experiment that will go up on this flight on tomorrow, and the buildup of the satellite, basically that this container has been loaded in at this point. There's solar panels we add, which produces the power for the mission, and we have battery systems that help store that power. We have a radio on the end there that's a patch antenna, and we communicate down to Santa Clara University. this is on October 25th, actually loading into the NanoRacks deployer that will be used on this mission. After that, it'll be taken up to the space station in the Cygnus module and unloaded by the astronauts. They will put it through the GEM airlock, and after this, they'll deploy it. There's an animation of it deploying. So ECAMSat will deploy, and then it'll have 4-day stabilization phase. And after those 4 days, microgravity will be pristine enough for us to run our experiment. It could happen earlier, but we have hysteresis rods and permanent magnets to help with this. This is a teardown of the laboratory as well, and this is a microfluidics card as it would sit. We'll go through each one of these wells and ping each well and store the data. Here's the different bags that we'll carry, and it's nutrient, Alamar blue, a buffer solution. And then the bacteria themselves will administer the antibiotic, and this is the most important phase here, so it's the stress response. And antibiotic and their stress response in general, the E. coli stress response to the antibiotic is something we're specifically watching. E. coli are capable of kind of becoming survival, upping their survival capability when they're stressed. So we're watching that mechanism genetically. There's a gene called RPOS, and specifically the immunologist at Stanford, he wants to target looking at this particular gene, and if we find that it does something different in space, we might find out that we would want to develop the countermeasure for that and understanding how to knock down an infection. This particular infection is called cystitis. It's common to terrestrial cases. It's a urinary tract infection. So for that matter, what we learn in space may allow us to key in on a specific pathway to help design more effective antibiotics and eliminate the antibiotic resistance effect. With that said, I'll stop here and ask for questions.
Great, thank you. Again, if you have a question in the room, please raise your hand, wait for the microphone, and if you are following along on NASA's social media channels, please use the hashtag AskNASA.
Hi, my name's Christina, and I'm from NASA Social. I had a question. You talked about doing the antibody research, but have you done anything with aptamers?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Have you been doing any research with aptamers binding to the E. coli?
No, I'm an engineer, so that would be better answered by the PI, the principal investigator. So he's at Stanford, and I can direct you to him for that question. So, any other questions? So the question is, are we determining the dosage amount and the effectiveness? Or yeah, so we have run this experiment 9 times on the ground, and we look at the knockdown effect on the E. coli and its response, its stress response, and so we look at enzyme activity with this dye. And if you noticed in one of those photos, there's kind of a pink color to the card afterward, and so we've specifically dialed in it's micrograms of antibiotic for the size of the volume, and yes, it's very tuned, and we've even our pumping capability and mixing and everything, that's all been tested on the ground extensively to determine how much. Roughly a teaspoon of volume or liquid is pumped through the card in each step or phase when we put it through.
I believe.
Jeff Faust, Space News. What's the benefit of doing this on a CubeSat versus a lab rack inside the station? What can you do in the CubeSat you can't do in the station?
Oh, that's a great question. I get asked this a lot. So for that matter, we could do this on the space station. And so this canister, we did talk about putting it, and there very well may be a follow-on mission, I don't know, that would include this canister on the space station. But there's advantages for the future. When we go to past low Earth orbit in the radiation environment of space, you want to take the lowest mass system as possible, and CubeSats will lend themselves to the future. You would want to deploy a CubeSat potentially with looking at the radiation effects in the future. So basically baseline how we do this in low Earth orbit, and then move forward to send maybe the same experiment or with some add-ons with a low mass CubeSat to answer the questions with radiation added. So there's a follow-on mission at NASA Ames called BioSentinel. It's not exactly like this, but it uses a lot of things we learned here. There's other things with life detection in the future we're talking about. Lessons learned with these microfluidic systems may actually be key to going to Enceladus in the future to do life detection and examples like that. So I'm not saying it's the exact copy, but what we're learning as researchers and the creative minds that design this system very well may have the answer for doing life detection in on other moons in the solar system or other planetary bodies.
We'll have time for 2 more questions. I believe we had one here in the front or in the middle in the room, and we'll come back to an Ask NASA question.
Thank you. Hey, my name's Daniel. I was just curious if you guys are looking at gene transfer, like through transduction or transformation, and if you feel like those processes would be any different in microgravity.
Again, this is better answered by the PI, but we're specifically targeting this one gene. So imagine we've removed all the other variables here. The human body's not involved here. So what we learn from this mechanism without the immune system involved, we look at the genetic response. So in science, sometimes you want to remove as many other variables that may be confusing the answers. So this does that for that. But specifically, what you're talking about probably would be a whole different experiment design. So sorry I don't have a good exact answer for you, but Dr. Matin at Stanford would be able to answer that.
So this question came in through Ask NASA. It's by @FossilLocator. What is the composition of the ECAM-SAT's casing? It looks like solid gold.
Oh. So I can guarantee you, yes, it is very flashy and it looks like gold. Probably wouldn't be able to pick it up like this if it was gold. It is aluminum, and we plate it with gold for thermal properties. So one of the many things that we have to do to the spacecraft is observe absorptance and emissivity characteristics on the spacecraft. So for this challenge, and we do thermal models of up to 640,000 calculations on this particular mission. Every minute of the mission's modeled. This surface was picked. So if you look at the actual the first image I showed of the spacecraft, you'll see a copperish look instead of gold, and that's because it is copperish. And through different phases and doing things, I can't get into all the details of how we do this, but long story short is we adjust thermal properties, and that's the reason it is that color. So.
Thank you, Stephen.
Okay, thank you.
Next up, we have Michelle Lucas, who is the founder and president at Higher Orbits, along with Abigail Yunker, a student who participates in Higher Orbits.
Well, good afternoon. We are so excited to be here. As mentioned, my name is Michelle Lucas. I'm with Higher Orbits. We are a 501c3 nonprofit that uses space as a launch pad to get students more interested in STEM while building leadership, teamwork, and communication skills. I'm also the program director for our Go for Launch program. It's a 2 or 3 day event where students get to work with an astronaut for the entire event, and they compete to have their experiment idea flown in space. And we have some slides that'll pop up here with some photos from one of our events. The experiment we're going to talk to you today about is because of a great sponsorship of Orbital ATK. They sponsored one of our divisions. And what happens in a division is there are multiple events. We pick a winner from each event. The overall division winner has their experiment flown to space. And that is the saguaro snakes experiment for this. The team actually has 5 team members. I have Abby here with me who's going to speak next. And if I could get Nicholas Jepson to stand up, he is also one of the team members, and you might see some of the others around this week. So they are around for questions. They are in these photos. We work with Space Tango to get the experiment built and manifested. And for those of you who were asking questions about funding and programs like this is somewhat of a standard summer camp where Johnny or Susie can choose to attend. We do run these all across the country, but we are very beholden to the support of others who are really big believers in STEM, such as Orbital ATK for their sponsorship and Space Tango for their work with us. But you don't want to hear from me. You want to hear about the science. And as such, I am really honored to get to turn this over to Miss Abby Yonker, who's going to tell you more about the saguaro snakes experiment that's about to fly on OA-8 tomorrow.
Hi everyone. As Michelle said, I'm Abigail Yonker. I'm one of 5 high school members from the Arizona Saguaro Snakes group. I'm here speaking on behalf of my group as well as myself when I say that I'm greatly appreciative and extremely honored to be given the opportunity from Higher Orbits. Back in February, when I met my now group members for the first time, we were given 5 hours over a 2-day period to design a project to be tested in a microgravity environment. Given the requirements and limitations of our experiment, we started brainstorming. And with the help of our STEM teacher and the 2015 movie The Martian, we came up with the idea of plant growth in space. We proceeded to brainstorm different variables that we could test within the process of growing plants. And we came across the process called nitrogen fixation. You may be asking, well, what is nitrogen fixation? And the answer is pretty cool. Nitrogen fixation is the process in which plants that contain a bacteria that can fix nitrogen in the Earth's atmosphere and turn it into other usable compounds such as nitrate, ammonia, and nitrogen dioxide. Not only is this process extremely important to keeping the nitrogen cycle balanced, but we also found out it's a natural fertilizer. From there, instantly we were intrigued, and we thought to ourselves, well, this is a naturally occurring process. Will something happen to it? What will change if we put it in a microgravity environment? And the idea grew. We thought about testing the amount of nitrate that gets put back into the soil and compare it to the exact project that's going on down here at Earth. By doing this, we'll be able to have a constant within our experiment and see if gravity really plays a role in this nitrogen fixation process. Originally, we planned our project to be used with peanut plants, but due to the small size of the cube lab and the help of Space Tango, we altered it to using microclovers. They both are nitrogen fixed, so our outcome is unchanged. For the cube lab itself, it's wetted soil with several sprouted little clovers. There's a video later on. It looks really cool. There's all kinds of required circuitry and sensors that monitor visually the plants, and as well as the amount of nitrate that's being put back into the soil. Along with all the sensors, we have a camera, which we originally didn't plan for, but when we had our FaceTime call with Space Tango, again, it looked really cool. So, my team and I's hope for this experiment is to eventually use these nitrogen-fixed plants to inhabit inhabitable planets at the moment. We're striving to inspire future generations to help, especially kids our age, being exposed to these great programs like Higher Orbits. I never dreamed of sending microclovers up to space to be tested for nitrogen soil. Like, Nick's over there smiling. He does the same thing. It's absolutely amazing what we get to experience this week here on Wallops in DC, and we are all just so honored. So thank you, Higher Orbits. Thank you, NASA. And thank you, Orbital ATK.
And we do have a quick video that can just roll as we're answering questions. We did test this all out on the ground, and so you can see what it's going to look like when the 75 microclovers start to grow. This is obviously in a 1G environment, but the students are going to be able to access this data from home. It does come down through Space Tango, but they are going to be able to log in and get it themselves.
Great, and with that, we will open it up to questions. If you have a question in the room, please raise your hand. If you're following along on NASA's social channels, use the hashtag AskNASA.
Jason Ryan with Spaceflight Insider. My question is for the young lady here. How did you get started? You look, I mean, I feel old, so old looking at you. You're so young. What made you decide to get started in this? Thank you.
Actually, at my high school I went to last year, my geometry teacher saw this because it was hosted at my old high school. And I had just started to get kind of interested in space, thought it was pretty cool, and I was talking to him about it. And as soon as I went to this camp, I knew. And I've been just so inspired. I want to be an aerospace engineer when I'm older. So really, it just came from the exposure at my high school. So.
Follow-up question. So when you got started in all this, did you think you'd be coming to attend a NASA launch and that you'd be working with a payload that would fly to the International Space Station?
No way. I was shocked when we went at the camp level, and then Nick and I started freaking out when we went at the higher level. We were just so honored. I never saw myself doing this. It's absolutely crazy and really cool. Thank you.
Again, if you have a question in the room, please raise your hand. I know we have one question now from Ask NASA.
Thanks. The question is, how can teachers register their class to participate in the CubeSat programs?
And so I can't speak to CubeSats. CubeSats are definitely different than Cube Labs. CubeSats actually go and they orbit the Earth. Cube Labs we work with inside the space station. For Go for Launch, they can visit us at www.higherorbits.org. We have programs all across the country, but we are looking to have programs in other locations. Look, I was a little girl who, when I was 3, fell in love with space, and I got to go to space camp, and I worked at NASA for a bunch of years, and I wanted to be able to bring space-inspired STEM events to the backyards of students who might not have otherwise realized how cool it was. I mean, now I know Abby does want to go to space camp, but originally she didn't know, and so certainly we welcome new students and new teachers.
I think we have time for one more question in the room. If you have a question, please raise your hand.
Just a question on how the experiment is run inside the ISS. Is it monitored by anyone on board, or is it all done remotely?
And so this is one of the beauties of automation and things created by Space Tango, and the ability to have a lot of experiments going that don't require crew time, so that way we can get a lot more science done. So this is going to be started with a command from Space Tango that goes through Marshall Space Flight Center and all, of course, the appropriate channels. And then the video and the data just gets downlinked to Space Tango. And so there really is no need for crew interaction other than the installation of the Tango Lab when they take it out of Cygnus. And so we get 30 days of data without having to impose on the crew time, which is so very precious.
We do have one more question. We're going to open it up to Camille to ask a question.
And I bet she's going to ask you.
It's for Abby, yes. So what would you tell other young women like yourself how they could be inspired by science, space, and future engineering?
Don't be intimidated. I walked into this camp and I was one of 2 girls. There was like at least 50 other guys. And I actually applied for another camp scholarship in is it in Alabama? Yeah, in Alabama. And for one of my essays, I had to write about an astronaut that inspired me. But I defined astronauts a little bit differently. I define them as anyone who takes part and helps and has a part in everything that goes into it. And Mary Jackson, one of the first black and women aerospace engineers, is who I put down. So you just can't be intimidated. You can't be afraid. You can't feel out of place, because you do belong in this field. You do belong in the world of science. It's vast. It's great. So just don't be afraid.
Thank you.
And I have to just very quickly say, it was interesting. This event was the only event where we've had such a low turnout of girls. We only had 3. We actually averaged between 35 and 40% female at all of our events. And so Abby was, it was odd that you were one of the few girls, but as you can tell, she's an amazing young lady. And all of the Saguaro snakes are amazing young individuals. So I hope if you see them around here, please do ask them questions. They would love to chat with you.
Thank you both. And we have one final speaker. Heath Mills is the CEO of Space Technology and Advanced Research Systems Incorporated.
Hi, thank you guys very much for having us here today, and an amazing presentation. Rough to follow that one. We'll see how it goes. So yes, my name is Heath Mills. I am the CEO of STARS, I'm CEO of STARS with Space Technology and Advanced Research Systems. What we do is we have a unique capacity to provide an environment within the space station to present your research into the microgravity environments. Now, this is done through, and as what was said before, remote access. We do this so that we also limit the amount of crew time that goes forward. And I have a set of slides that I'd like to start off with here to show a little bit more about what we do and what we can offer at STARS. If we would go to the first slide. And as that comes up in a few seconds, there it goes right there. That is STARS. That is our motto right there laid out before you. If we go to the next slide, I want to just show one key point. Now, my background, I'm actually a molecular microbiologist. I'm not an engineer like everybody else. And so when we started this company, we viewed the International Space Station as a field station, as a mechanism to do research in a new environment. And so with the next slide, what you show on here is that what we're trying to do as a company is to move your advanced research, your research that you do here on Earth, next slide, up to the International Space Station. And in doing so, what we're trying to build upon is a mechanism where you can translate your research, all of your hard work, all of your time spent here on Earth doing all the experiments that you're doing, into this new environment to be able to provide connectivity between what happens on the International Space Station and what's happening in your lab and with the incredible work that's being done here on Earth. Next slide, please. And so to do this, we have the STARS-1 experiment facility. Now, the STARS-1 experiment facility is a locker insert for those engineers out there. This fits into the U.S. National Lab and provides us command and control capabilities on Earth in a temperature-controlled environment because, as you know, controlling the temperature allows you to really constrain your experiments, whether you're doing microbiology like I like to do, or you're doing stem cells, tissue culture, plant biology, biofuels, whatever your experiment may be. You have to make sure your environment is completely temperature controlled. Next slide, please. And a little bit of a close-up of the STARS-1 experiment facility. You see three main portions of it. On the right side, you see the static rack. Now, the static rack, this is where the experiments are exposed to microgravity. The wheel you see in the back left corner, what you're seeing here is a centrifuge. So here it is, this experiment spent all this time to get up to microgravity, and we turn gravity back on. So those poor cells, that poor biology now goes right back to a gravity environment. But this is key because now any differences that your experiment experiences in space, in this environment, in our temperature-controlled environment, we can limit the variable to one thing, gravity. So any temperature variances, any radiation variances, any vibrational noise within the station, you can check that out with gravity on or gravity off. Again, focusing on and limiting the amount of variables allows you to have better results in your final experiment. Now, for the experiment I'm going to talk about a lot here in a few seconds, right in the front bottom left corner, you see an empty space. This allows us to plug in larger cube labs, advanced lab capabilities, especially those that are produced by Space Pharma, who I'll show you a couple slides on those in a second. But that's the STARS-1 experiment facility, and that's what we have currently on station. And next slide shows Miss Peggy Whitson plugging in our experiment facility into the National Lab. We had a successful launch back on August 14th with SpaceX 12. Peggy was able to successfully install our platform into the National Lab. We were able to turn it on, communicate with it. There was some little bit of tense moments there. We were making sure everything checked out right. But we were extremely happy to see that this thing plugged in, turned on, and we are ready to start doing a lot of really cool research. So next slide, please. Now, to do those, we do have partner companies. We are working with both Airbus and with Kaiser Italia, provides us mechanisms to do all kinds of experiments, plant growth experiments, little mini aquariums, closed ecosystems to grow algae and different types of cells in these. Next slide. And also, we can even do mixing. We can provide an access to mix different fluids, feed your cells, feed your experiments, preserve your experiments, freeze those experiments. As a background in molecular microbiology, I really want to make sure that when these experiments go up, when they come back down, the experiment is constrained properly. So all this hard work that you have done over all these years to get ready for flight, the experiment comes back the way you wanted it to come back. And so we take really good effort in doing that without the need for crew interaction, which means we get to fly more experiments, we get to do more research, and everybody gets to learn more about what microgravity has in store. So with the next slide, we introduce Space Pharma. Now, we do have a couple individuals from Space Pharma here today that has been working hard with us over the last week that has allowed us to produce a new cube lab, and it'll be the first time this lab has been flown inside the International Space Station. It has flown externally as a free-flying satellite and is currently flying right now due to a successful launch back in February. But we are very, very happy to have them and have this cube lab going into our new facility. Next slide, please. And this is a quick little design of it. The cube lab is about the same size of what you see up here with the solid gold one. Wish it was. You wouldn't be leaving here with it. But what this provides is the mechanism to house unique experiments within our experiment facility. And next slide, please. This shows what it actually looks like before we plugged it into the transport mechanism, the Merlin, to get it up to the International Space Station. Next slide. Now, this is where the key part of it comes into. Inside the experiment, inside the SPMG, the Space Pharma Microgravity Lab, inside the SPMG, what you have is a capacity to run 4 different individual experiments. Again, totally autonomous. You can mix different fluids. You can see how they interact, but the fun part is it also has a microscope and a spectrophotometer. So we're able to beam back data that allows to be able to see in near real time what is happening to your cells, what's happening to that biology, how it's reacting and responding to microgravity. This provides us really unique analytic capabilities on orbit. So yes, we can bring it back down because, and there's extreme advantage to doing work inside the station. You can bring the samples back down and analyze them. So with that, we can bring it back down. You can do your metabolomics, is what one of the experiments we'll be doing here shortly. You can do the morphology experiments, but you can also look at it in real time using the microscope and the spectrophotometer. And that's what the 4 chambers at the top show up there, and that's what we were able to do. So next slide. And yes, we do have a little bit of fun, and I get to embarrass some of the Space Pharma guys by putting their face on TV now. But we did process everything here at Wallops, and I want to thank the groups at Wallops that really helped us get the labs ready, get everything ready, get the facilities here ready to be able to produce the amount of science and the style and the high level of science that we're trying to do. I would like to thank them for allowing us to have the facilities here to process our samples. The next slide. And eventually hand those over to the cold stow team. And as a biologist, it kind of creeps me out when whether it's 37 degrees or it's 4 degrees, it's still cold stow. Not my rules. But having the ability then to plug it in to and secure it within Merlin, which is shown on the right side over there. We are one of the powered spots on orbital going up. It will be temperature controlled at 37 degrees for the entire ascent portion of it. It will be plugged into the STARS 1 experiment facility, kept at 37 degrees, and we will feature 3 different big experiments on these, and 2 of those I'm going to talk about now. One is done by Dr. Oliver Ulrich in his lab out of the University of Zurich. Dr. Ulrich and the team that has been here for the past week with us here in Chickateague, they're looking at macrophage cells. These macrophage cells are those that are going in with your immune system and affect your immune system. This is understanding what happens with the human immune system when you get to microgravity. How does it change? How does it respond? There's astronauts come back and complain of sickness, complain of ill effects of being in microgravity. Well, what are the morphological changes to these key cells in your immune system during space flight? We'll be able to beam back data for them to be able to look at these images and see how these cells change during microgravity and exposure to microgravity. Because they're coming back, they'll also be able to look at some of the metabolomics, what the cells produce, what the cells move, and how they change their environment when they're growing. We'll be able to detect that and determine that during the return mission. So that's one of the experiments that are happening. I have a short video coming up next that will also show a little bit about one of these other experiments that are being hosted by the SPMG. And there's audio with this video too. Hopefully. It's not over.
What the STARS 1 EF is able to do is provide a stable environment for temperature-controlled experiments to be conducted on the International Space Station. A researcher from NASA is looking at how Staphylococcus aureus grows in microgravity. What her data has shown is that in microgravity, Staphylococcus loses its pathogenicity. So if
All
we
right,
can
so
understand
then if
how
this
that
sound is not going
happens,
out, I'll go ahead and
now
tell you
we
a
can
little
talk
bit
about
read
new drug
through it.
compounds, new therapeutics.
Luckily, I am the
The
microbiologist,
possibilities
so I
with
can
this
say
experiment are
Staphylococcus
endless.
aureus without fumbling. So what this experiment is, and Dr. Sarah Wallace from JSC is the lead PI on this experiment. What she's doing is, and what her experiment, her work over the past 6 years has shown, is that microgravity has a unique effect on Staphylococcus aureus. So Staph aureus, staph infections. Staphylococcus aureus affects about 30, or is currently resident on about 30% of the population at all times, on your skin, on your neighbor beside you. Now everybody slides a little further apart. Now, what Staph aureus does is it's an opportunistic pathogen. If you scratch your skin, if you have a cut, if you have a boo-boo on your hand, the Staph aureus can get into your skin and cause an infection. Hospitals have a very big issue with staph infections. One thing that Sarah's been able to show over the last 6 years is that microgravity has an effect on Staph aureus by reducing the pathogenicity of Staph aureus. Interesting. So, if you can find a mechanism to turn off the pathogenicity of Staph aureus, wouldn't that be a good thing? And so by understanding the molecular mechanisms that happen within the cell to turn off Staph aureus pathogenicity, you're talking about drug discovery. You're talking about new therapeutics. You're talking about new medicines that may be able to be produced because you understand the molecular makeup of these cells. The only way to do it is to go to space. The only way to do it is to go to space, properly constrain the experiment, bring it back down, and analyze the molecular content of that cell. That's what Sarah's trying to do, and that's what we're trying to help her do while facilitating her research on station. So that's what we're doing on this experiment. We really thank Orbital for the chance to do this. We thank CASES for the opportunity and the funding to help get these experiments to space. And we'd like to thank our team and the Staph aureus guys, the Space Pharma guys back here for helping us get the cube built this week, and Dr. Ulrich's crew for being here, for loading their cells and getting everything together, and especially the Wallops crew for helping us on site to get the labs in shape and ready to go for us to have a successful turnover last week. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Heath. We have time for a few questions in the room. We'll start here, and also if you are following along on NASA social channels, ask your questions using the hashtag AskNASA.
Hey there, I'm Sarah with the NASA social crew today. So for the investigations that do require crew intervention, how do you get directions to them? Do you send them a book? Do you video with them ahead of time? Or how do you ensure that they're going to be conducted within the parameters that you need?
So we have a lot of interaction leading up to the mission. There is multiple meetings that we have with the crew office, with members at Marshall that manage the payload systems, and we provide ops controls and ops plan for NASA and at Marshall to be radioed up or beamed up to the crew or directed with the crew. Every single bit is scripted with photographs, with instructions, written instructions, so the crew knows every single piece of movement that we need them to do to be able to properly execute the experiments. They are very intrigued with some of the experiments that we're providing them. They're having fun up there. They enjoy doing these experiments, at least that's what they tell us. But they enjoy doing this and understanding it the proper way, because for them, they understand that there's been a lot of effort put into these experiments, both in the ground, by the PIs, from the payload developers, that's us, and so they really want to take a lot of time to do the experiments properly. So they're interested in it. They want to learn. So we interact with the payload providers and the developers, and then Marshall to make sure the instructions are correctly processed to the crew.
Do we have another question in the room? We have a question from Ask NASA. This will be our final question.
Thanks. This question's from @CBS_Space News. I'm confused about the total number of CubeSats on board Cygnus. I know 14 will be deployed after unberthing, but how many will go inside for launch from the Kibo airlock?
All right. So total CubeSats, 14 on the outside, and then we are launching 2 on the inside, and those 2 will join 3 more, which launched on SpaceX 12, which I guess you were there too, and they will be deployed from the Kibo airlock, hopefully this month.
Thank you for coming back up.
And if I could say one more thing real fast, the transduction question that was done earlier, talk to me later. I'd love to do that experiment. So whoever said that, let's talk. So, thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for joining, for asking great questions. We're excited for tomorrow's launch, 7:37 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. NASA TV coverage starts at 7 a.m. Follow along at nasa.gov/live.